So this video is on Flashback Data Archive, and it's going to consist of two different sections. The first section is on Flashback Data Archive. It's a simple Flashback Data Archive example. And the second section, we're going to do a schema evolution example. But this is the first section, and I have some scripts that are going to help us. And so let's start with the first. Let's log into the database. What I really want to do is just query the database and look at the archive log mode. Notice that the archive log mode is in no archive log. The archive logs don't have to be present because all of this stuff is saved to disk. All of the stuff associated with a Flashback Data Archive is saved to disk. So let's go ahead and create a tablespace. And there's nothing special about this command other than we're just going to create a tablespace. And let's create a Flashback Data Archive associated with this tablespace. So first thing I want to do is run this command. This command, well, let's look at it first. This command will actually fail, so let's run it and I'll show you why. This fails because we didn't give it a retention. A retention is actually required. So let's go ahead and rerun this with the retention. Okay, so we created a Flashback Data Archive associated with a tablespace. Now we can query against it, and there are two ways to query this. We can query the Flashback Data Archive itself, the DBA Flashback Archive. And this just shows that we have a Flashback Data Archive and a certain retention, which is 365 days. We can also query the tablespaces associated with a Flashback Data Archive. And let's look at that. And this is DBA Flashback Archive TS for tablespace. And this just shows that the Flashback Data Archive is associated with this tablespace FDA. I didn't give it a quota, so that means that it can use the entire tablespace if it needs to. Alright, so let's create a table. We're going to create this table. So the object of this this exercise here is to create a table, or start with the employees table. In this case, I'm going to copy it to the employees archive. I'm going to delete some data out of it and create a view on top of this particular table, but associated with just those records that have been deleted. And this is a very good example that was associated with the OCM exam, something that's very relevant here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to log in the HR user to actually create this table. So the point of this script is just to create the employees archive table. The next thing I want to do is to archive this table. So let's take a look at how that's done. So I'm going to try to give it a Flashback Archive associated with FDA1, which is the archive that we created. It will fail because we didn't grant the appropriate permissions. So the permission to archive is Flashback Archive. And so I log in assist to do that, and then go back to HR and to do this command again. You see that it fails because I didn't have the privilege. I granted it the privilege, and now it's altered, so we're done. So just because you've been granted the privilege to do a Flashback Archive doesn't mean you can unarchive it or stop archiving it, and that's the point of this next script. So in this next script, I'm going to say, okay, no Flashback Archive, and it will also fail. And the only way to do that is to actually give it Flashback Archive permissions, a privilege, and that will give me the ability to no Flashback the archive for this particular table. But I go ahead and put it back because I want to continue with this exercise. So two important privileges. One is the Flashback Archive, which will allow you to flashback but you need more than that, Flashback Archive Administer, to do more than that, namely to stop the archiving. So let's go ahead and run this guide. Okay, so now let's take a look at what we've done so far. So this is just a look at the employees archive table. I want to know what the hire date is and the min hire date and the max hire date. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so there are some, the earliest date is in 2001, and the latest date is in 2008. The next thing I want to do is create a bind variable, and I'm actually going to use this in my view later on. But for time being, let's go ahead and look at what I'm about to do. Oops, actually. Okay, so basically all I'm doing is creating a bind variable that has the date in it. There is no way to create a bind variable with the data type of sys timestamp or timestamp. So you have to create it as a varchar. I put a car here, but it could be varchar, and I save the current time to this particular bind variable, and I'm going to actually use it later. So let's go ahead and run it. And the bind variable is called delete time. And I also printed it, so this is what the current time is. So now I'm actually going to delete some records off of the table. I'm going to delete those records that are from 2005 and before. So let's go ahead and do that. The next thing I want to do is, okay, so I want to start to create a view. And to do so, I need all the columns of the table, and the best way to do that is to use the list AGG function. So let's take a look at that. Here's the syntax of the list AGG function, and I'm actually going to use this because it produces a list of all the column names in a nice format so that I can use it when I create the view. So let's go ahead and see what the view creation looks like. Oh, and before I go any further, notice that when I deleted 24 rows. That's important. So now I'm going to create a view called Employees Archive View as select of all the columns that were Employees Archive. This I got from before in the list AGG function, and I said where timestamp is between, and I used the date that I got from the here, and I'm going to have to actually change this because I did this before. So let's actually edit this. Let's put in the new bind variable. Oh, what happened? Let's go back and get that bind variable again. All right, now let's look at that view one more time. No, ideally what I would have liked to have done is use the bind variable in here, but it gave me an error to do so. So actually I just went ahead and just took the the actual value of it. And I could have also done this, and I'm about to do this in just a minute. I could use min value and max value. But let's go ahead and create. But I wanted to show you this way using a bind variable as well. Let's go ahead and create the view, and then let's actually look at the view, or actually run the view. So all right, and here's the 24 deleted records. I could have also, as I said in the view creation, could have just said min value and max value as opposed to using the contents of the bind variable. So I could have said so. Let's go ahead and just try that for fun. And then let's run the query again. And we see the 24 records that were deleted. And that's the end of this particular section. In this second section, I want to do a schema evolution example, and I actually have some scripts that will help us. So let's take a look at those. Some of these we'll have to edit while I'm doing them, and it'll become clear as to why that is. So let's go ahead and just get started. Let's start with number 18. In this particular query, in this particular script, I'm actually going to create a user called Soleo. He's going to and build some tables, and he's actually going to actually create some flashback associated with the tables that he's created. So all this does is create the user and grants him the necessary privileges, in other words, to be able to do the flashback. So let's go ahead and run him. Okay. The next thing we want to do is actually create a table. Let's take a look. There's nothing special here. We're just going to create a table called employees test. So let's go ahead and do that. We're doing this as the Soleo user. In the next script, let's take a look at what it does. Actually, we're going to archive the table. Let's take a look at that. We have created this flashback data archive in the previous section, so I'm not going to recreate it now, but I am going to go ahead and archive this particular table. Okay. In the next section, all I do is populate this table. I create 3 records and I commit it. So let's do that. Alright, so now we're going to just look at the transactions associated with this particular table. So let's go ahead and run that. So we're just doing a versions query of all the records that are in the table. So we're doing from min value to max value. So let's go ahead and do that. And we see, notice that there are 3 records, but they're all the same transaction ID, because notice that I had only 1 commit, so they were all part of a logical unit, 1 logical unit of work. That was 22. Okay, so the next In the next step here, I'm actually going to modify the table, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to create a new column called company email. I'm going to populate that column from the first name and last name, and then I'm actually going to drop a column called the home email. So let's go ahead and do that. So in the next step, I just want to query. Let's see. Hold on. Okay. So in this, I'm being a little whimsical here. Here's how this works. So once we create some major DDL changes, the Flashback Data Archive still keeps tabs on all of that information, but it creates another table to track all of that stuff, and it's called the sys FBA DDL call map, and then it's associated with the object ID of the table. So in this particular case, I'm actually looking for the object ID of the employee's test table that I've created, and I'm actually going to plug that in over here. And the way I do that is use this new val method. So the new val will capture the object ID in this query to a substitution variable called the ampersand object ID val, and actually use that here. So in the OCM exam, we're going to actually run this query, figure out what that object ID is, and then look at or do some looking at the sys FBA DDL call map underscore and the object ID of the base table. So without further ado, let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so in this case, the base table's object ID is 76826, and then the call map table is the following: sys FBA DDL call map 76826, and I'm actually going to write that down. 76826. And so let's see the next query is. Okay, so let's actually host out FBI 25, and I'm going to change this to 76826, which 826. So in this next query, all I'm doing is a describe of this particular table. So it tells us the start and stop times, or SCNs, of these particular columns, and we're going to query this in just 1 second. Let's look at 26. Okay, so now we're going to look at 76826. And so notice that we did drop the home email column, and so the home email column is only relevant now between this start SCN and this SCN. And when we reference it, this is the historical column name, but when we reference it in the versions query, we're actually going to have to use this particular column name and not the historical name. So let's make a copy of that. And I had forgotten the between SCNs. Let's take a look at that for a second. So we need these two SCN numbers. 78639 and 878867. So let's Okay. So here's our query now before I run it. So actually, I want to look at some of the transactions associated with home email between the start and the end SCN. So I specify those particular start and stop SCN, and actually if I reference a column that is no longer available, I need to use the column name as opposed to historical column name, which is what I changed here as well. So let's go ahead and run that. And I made a mistake. Oh, yes I did. And we can see we have these insert statements that I had created when the home email column was actually present. And that's that's it to schema evolution, and that's it for this particular section in video.